Okay. So I have no idea what to talk about, how to do this now that I've decided to put the scripture in. So I prayed about it, and the answer I got was start at the beginning. And so we'll start with the Genesis in the beginning. Um, and I want to kind of explain how this applies to the way I look at the body. So you have in the beginning, so the two different systems are the medical system and the way that I look at it from a physiological base designed by God. So you start off with the science of it, because I believe that science will one day prove the existence of God. And I think quantum physics is kind of getting us closer to it. So, in Genesis, it says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So let's just stop with that one phrase, that God created the heavens and the earth. And that turns into everything we have forward. The medical system believes that human beings evolved from monkeys, who evolved from lower life forms, who evolved all the way back down. And then it was just random happenstance that these chemicals were in this primordial ooze, and they came together and it created consciousness and the whole 9 yards. The problem is that when you boil it down to where the chemicals come from, you come back like, at the very beginning, they're like, well, there was nothing, and then there was something. And you're like, well, doesn't that violate the laws of physics that matter cannot be created, matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed? Like, isn't that one of the rules of physics? That you're now circumventing to get the evolutionary hypothesis of things just started out of nowhere. That was an issue that I had, and so when you look at it from the Christian standpoint, that in the beginning there was nothing and God created everything, you kind of want to be like, okay, well, who does God say he is? Because we're looking at time, we're looking at matter creation, all that type of stuff. And God said he is, basically it's he is, he was, and he always will be. Okay. So it is outside of time function, and it is something that is constant and always here. God also refers to himself as light. Well, what we understand from physics is that energy, photonic energy or light, and matter are interchangeable. So Einstein's theory of relativity, the E equals mc squared, the energy equals mass times acceleration of light squared, talks about the idea that matter and energy are interchangeable. So take the idea of the Star Trek replicator that has pure energy, and it takes that pure energy and coalesces it into a physical form of matter. So that is theoretically possible. And so if a substance or being that was made out of consciousness and pure energy decided that it wanted to make rocks and air and helium and hydrogen and every single thing that's built upon that function, theoretically that would be pretty simple. It would, I don't know, say simple, sorry. That would be theoretically functional within that framework. So, that actually makes sense, that if there was nothing here but God, and God is pure energy and God is pure light, that if God chose to, he could take that light and he could form it into any part of matter that he wishes. So there's that. That brings into the idea that we were actually created on purpose, which is funny because it talks about how, there is God inside of us, that God created us, and there's God inside of us. We were made in God's image. If you actually break down, like, okay, well, there's the organ, and then there's the tissues, and then there's the molecules, and you break it down, there's protons and neutrons and quarks and leptons, and if you keep breaking it down, it gets to light, coherent light. So at the very, very basis of all physical matter that we know of is cohesive light. If God says that he's cohesive, that he is the light, and if there's God in all of us, that meshes. I'm not saying that that's exactly what it is. This is just the way that I've been putting it together from what I've learned and read and studied. So all that meshes, all that lines out. So what I take that to be is that, okay, if our bodies were designed, if they were created and they were designed, they were put together, then the best way to treat that body, to make it heal, regenerate, repair, regrow, is to study the design of the creator, physiology. How does this work? What's going on? And then you have to also have to kind of go with the premise that if it was designed by God, that God didn't mess up. Your cholesterol is supposed to be there. I mean, you're supposed to have hormones. everything that's there that is naturally occurring is supposed to be there. So, and it would also seem to reason that if we were created with the intent of utilizing the plants and the animals as our fuel source and our food source and our medicine source, that would be sufficient to everything we need. We wouldn't need to synthetically create chemicals that are not found in nature and not found in our body. And if we were to put those chemicals into our body, it would not allow it to run very well, which if you look at it, the drugs don't heal things. Drugs suppress, drugs alter, drugs change. Drugs will activate, but they don't create and they don't heal. So that the body actually does the healing. You can increase or decrease the functionality, but man can't cause something to heal. Once tissue is dead, it's dead. We can't make it come alive again. So, these are some of the things that you kind of have, that I kind of factor in. And so it's the idea of, when I talk about, and a lot of these things I talk about are bored out. So when I talk about that God didn't screw up when he gave you cholesterol, it's extremely important for the way that you're designed to be. And we look at it and we find out, oh, guess what? When the system doesn't get what the system wants, that's when we get plaquing. Cholesterol has no bearing. You've been lied to because they're trying to sell you statin drugs because they want to control everything about it. But here's the thing. What does create it? Sleep apnea, because it's oxygen deprivation. Bacterial infections like in the mouth and things like that. Not limited to, but in the mouth. Why? Because we're dripping bacteria into the system all the time that the body has to fight off. Okay. And LDL cholesterol carries things around the body. It's the reason we make D3. It's the reason we have your cholesterol system, cholesterol function, LDL function helps tremendously with your immune system. And the other thing that we know that creates cholesterol plaquing is free radical damage. So when we put things in the body views as a toxic source, like preservatives and things like that, or, chemicals your body, can't handle. We create inflammatory responses and problems from there going forward. So the whole idea is if our bodies were created, not out of happenstance, but they were actually created and designed by somebody or something who has substantial more knowledge of function and physics and everything that we do, then the best idea to treat that body is to study it and figure out how it was designed to begin with, and then go through that. And so that's kind of the real difference between the way that I see the functional world and where medicine sees it. Medicine sees it as we evolved out of nothing. We came from nothing, we evolved out of nothing, and it's all mysterious, weird goo. And so man's knowledge is powerful enough that we can subvert the natural function and do whatever we want to with it because we know better than nature. Man knows better than nature. I reject that idea. I think that nature knows more about function and life than we do. And so that's where I wanted to go back and say, okay, what does the physiology say? What do the studies say? Like, how is the body supposed to work? And how do we get back to that original design? That's basically been the whole function of everything that I've tried to do. And if you look at, for instance, type 2 diabetes, well, how do you fix type 2 diabetes? Well, what you do is you take the things that are offending the body out. So you take the inflammatory chemicals out, which we know holds insulin levels high. So you take the toxic chemicals out, most of which are processed man-made chemicals, pull those chemicals out, and then you feed the body, you work with the body. You feed the body a low glycemic diet because we want to reduce the body's natural production of insulin. And as you do that, the body heals. And as the body heals, it becomes more insulin sensitive. And so we just go back to original design. Instead of saying, well, we're going to, because you went sideways in the physiology somewhere. So instead of forcing the body to do things with drugs or offsetting function with drugs, we should just go back and be like, how would the body heal from this? Like, how was it designed to heal from this? And healing receptor sites is one of the ways the body was designed to function. And so my underlying premise is always that the body was designed, it was designed in a logical and reproducible manner. And if we just go back and try to figure out how and why it was designed that way, we will then figure out how to heal it, how to deal with the function of the body. And so that's the real functional difference. You look at some of the things that we have access to plant-wise, and we can fix between plants and meats and that whole stuff. We can fix the vast majority of things that we've seen in the body. You can, addiction, PTSD, depression, anxiety, everything. Like there's nothing. that we look at, we're like, well, here's an issue that we can't help reset. There are some genetic deformities and things like that that we can't alter at the moment. But that's kind of where we are. We can start to figure out that we have these issues, and we can find natural functional ways around it. The greatest example is the MTHFR issues. Well, MTHFR is a failure of your body to methylate folic acid properly. Great. Well, what do we give the body? Naturally methylated folic acid, and the body does just fine. Like we have no secondary issues. So as long as we stick with the original design, we'll be fine. And that's where a lot of this comes from. It's we didn't evolve, we were designed and we were created. And if we can figure out the design, if we can pour into how our bodies were created instead of what can we do to manipulate the body, I think that we can find healing and healthcare in that pretty easily. So that's been the basis, that's been the beginning, that's been the undergirding function of what I do. So when I say the body was designed and we were created this way, this thing, that's what I'm talking about. So, that's the genesis of where I look at these things, is that we were created on purpose, we were created with a purpose, and we were created for a purpose. And so all we got to do is just find that purpose. So that's your psychological, spiritual function. And then we just need to make sure that we maintain the biochemical systems that God set forth with us, which are the natural biochemical systems, keeping the synthetics and the toxic chemicals out, giving the body the nutrients it requires to build, regenerate, and heal. So that's where a lot of this has come from. And I understand that a lot of the medical community does not believe that and does not feel that way. But I'd also like to point out that the medical community has taken us the wrong way in healthcare for the last 50 years. Every single year that we've been away from this philosophy, we've been on the more drugs, more man's knowledge, we've gotten worse. Every single way we measure healthcare for the past 50 years has gotten worse. I don't know how many years you've got to look at before you go, maybe the underlying principle philosophy we have is inaccurate. And we start like, what other philosophies could we have? What are the ways can we look at the body in a way that would make it heal easier, better, and faster? And why don't we look at the physiology? So that's kind of where it is. And that's kind of how that one started. So if you guys have questions on that, send them in. I'm sure lots of questions come up. Time is always an interesting function. People ask me about time a lot. Time is kind of an interesting thing. We've lived on this planet the entirety time that we've known about living. And so time is very set for us in a very specific way. From a physics standpoint, remember that time is different everywhere. Time is dictated by space-time, and gravity actually plays a significant role in the flow and functionality of time. So not only is a day, which is defined as one full rotation of the planetary body, different as far as we measure it time-wise, it's also different functionally because of the mass and the gravity function of that body. So when we look at time, we can't look at it as a linear thing. We have to look at it as something that is kind of here all the time, like everything is kind of in one spot. So, that's the other piece we get out of it, but that's where a lot of the genesis of the principle comes from. So whenever I can't figure something out, I go back to how is the body designed? How is it supposed to work? Because if it's in violation of the way the body is supposed to work, how do we fix the violation and allow the chain of function to happen again? That's the way I look at it. I understand that if you think the body just evolved out of happenstance, I totally understand where it would end up being that, at the end of the day, you have no idea or no purpose or no driving function of where we tie things back to. It's just whatever somebody says. So, and that's why it gives me a place to start and order and function like that. So that's where the genesis of all of the way that I look at the body comes from. And that's why I think that we have the success we do when other people fail. But that's my opinion. You have a fabulous day.